Christy Schreiber, and we're here to discuss books that have changed the world and have changed us.
And I'm Gary Schreiber, and this is the How to Love Lit podcast. This week's poetry supplement comes after my favorite series to date, our series on F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby. I mean, what a tour de force that whole thing was. We talked about nihilism and symbolism and murder and jazz and gangsters and wealth. And ironically, what there was no love story.
Oh, yeah.
Which is what me and many other people assume is at the core of this. But anyway, the whole book was a study in irony. Of course, I'm an enormous fan of irony.
Do you like irony?
Ironically, I do. So, I mean, it was all a lot of fun. And this week we're going back to that same era. And we'll still have fun, but it will be a much darker nature, much darker fun. I don't know what to think of this old T.S. Eliot guy. He's a very cryptic guy.
Well, let me assure you, if you like irony, do you like irony?
Ironically, I do.
He has something for you because he will not disappoint, starting from the title. He uses it quite a bit, as a lot of people do during this modern era. T.S. Eliot is a complicated person, and he's a very complicated writer. So for that reason, we're going to have to extend this poetry supplement to 2 episodes.
Oh my.
I know.
A new precedent.
Well, I tried to get in one, but it's just not possible, and I can't leave out the juice because that's the fun part. So hopefully we can entice everyone to spend 2 weeks with us talking about poetry. I think we can make it fun, and this is a very cryptic guy, to use your language.
Yes, well, I stand by that description. I mean, even his citizenship is unusual and complicated. He's a notable American writer born in the U.S., but America really can't claim him, and not just because he spent his adult life in Europe. I mean, lots of Americans have done that, but he naturalized to become a British citizen. But not even just that, he became British among the British.
A leader.
Yes, an authority on English, not American literature. He appears in American literature anthologies, but often only this early piece. His most notable works belong in the British canon. That's expertise in 2 very crowded fields.
I wonder if we resent that about him defecting like that. I can't even imagine attempting to do something that audacious. I know I'm no T.S. Eliot, but I feel a lot more comfortable when we're reading and discussing things from this side of the pond. I know the culture better, and I can understand American works a lot better. And even though I've lived, as you know, a large part of my life in Brazil and speak Portuguese and have read Brazilian literature, I don't presume to be an expert or to be Brazilian among Brazilians like he has managed to do. For me, there's just a difference in living in a place and being from there. But T.S. Eliot managed to become an expert in 2 cultures and was really able to discuss. It's amazing to me the influence he had on British literature. I mean, he even elevated writers that today we take for granted as having always been famous, like John Donne, and they were not, but of the influence of T.S. Eliot. And he devalued people that, you know, we've always held in high esteem, like Tennyson. So he asserted himself. He became an expert. He was an editor. He was a publisher. He commented. He was a critic. That was his day job, actually. So his influence cannot really be understated, and it doesn't really matter for the most of us, for the most part. But we're going to spend 2 weeks focusing on one poem because it'll just kind of give you a little bit of insight on who this person was and why you probably have heard of his name, even though you didn't know anything about what he wrote, maybe. His writings are complex. They were influential. They're not like Gatsby in the sense that you can read them and enjoy them on one level, and even if you don't get all the layers. With Eliot, you read them and you might just be confused. Like the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock is one of the easier ones from my perspective. But it was so difficult when it was first discovered by the notable poet whom most people would recognize this name too, Ezra Pound, whose most famous line was, "Make it new." When he first read Prufrock, he said, "I'm not sure what it means, but I can tell it's genius."
So if you're confused, that's when you know
that's
you're
the right idea. Yeah.
genius. Well, I want to interrupt you there for a moment because as a non-literature person, I don't get that. I mean, why do people want to write like that? And why do people like it? I mean, why make something difficult to read, and why is that considered good? I mean, in other areas of study, if the writer is confusing, isn't that really just considered poor communication? Not better?
Well, you would think. It's really kind of a good question, and really something that speaks directly to modern poetry, and maybe worth stopping for 1 minute to think about, because that is a good question. We could spend more than one podcast really talking about what modern poetry is.
Please,
and what it's trying to do. But honestly, okay, let's think about a piece of modern art, for example. I'll talk about my favorite because, I get to. So my favorite piece of modern art is Guernica by Pablo Picasso. I'm not an expert at modern art, but I really like this piece of art. I've talked about it before because I went to see it in Madrid, and it really made an impression on me. When I saw this painting, if you've seen the painting, you don't know what you're looking at. It's confusing. It doesn't make sense. But when you look at it, and I'll never forget it, I saw this giant painting. I was in a room crammed full of people, and everyone was silent. And I just felt awe. I felt emotion. And I really felt, as I looked at that painting, the pain of the people in the Spanish Civil War. And that's what modern poetry is supposed to do. You don't have to understand it, just like I didn't have to understand Guernica. You can feel the emotion and feel what people are feeling or what they're experiencing. And what modern poetry tries to do more than anything else is communicate the emotions of modern life. What have we done to ourselves in the name of progress and technology and urban living? And most of it is kind of dark, and lots of it is psychological. Freud influenced this movement really to a great deal. What's going on in your head? How are the things that we're doing affecting us? Our minds are fragmented. We have lots of different thoughts, and these kind of things crisscross all the time. We don't think in linear motions. Lots of our thoughts are really confusing. They're bombarding us with images. That's what we call stream of conscious writing. It's confusing, but it's not, because it's not trying to communicate a linear message. It's trying to communicate thought patterns and emotions.
So the fact that it seems complicated and difficult, but it's not, is that ironic?
Yes, we're back to irony.
Oh, I'm glad we were able to touch on that. Well, just for clarification, I want to point out that when you say modern, you're not talking about today.
No.
Because ironically, the modern movement has come and gone. We've even gone past the postmodern movement, which came after the modern movement. And you're referencing a specific period that went from about 1900 to 1950, give or take a few years. And of course, what stands out is the overwhelming events that overshadowed everything else on planet Earth during that modern time period were the two world wars, World War I and World War II. And that ended with an atomic bomb, which changes everything. And if you made it through that, unfortunately, depending on where you lived, next you were hit with the genocides that came with communism and fascism and military coups and totalitarianism around the globe. And this was directly affecting every continent except North America.
We got lucky there. But you're...
Hi, I'm Dorina, co-founder of Quo. You might know us as OpenPhone. My dad is a business owner, and growing up, he always kept his ringtone super loud so he'd never miss a customer call. That stuck with me. When we started Quo, our mission was to help businesses not just stay in touch, but make every customer feel valued, no matter when they might call. Quo gives your team business phone numbers to call and text on your phone or computer. Your calls, messages, and contacts live in one workspace, so your team can stay fully aligned and reply faster. And with our AI agent answering 24/7, you'll really never miss a customer. Over 90,000 businesses use Quo. Get 20% off at quo.com/tech. That's quo.com/tech. And we can port your existing numbers over for free. Quo. No missed calls, no missed customers.
Only Boost Mobile.
Boost Mobile?
We'll give you a free year of service.
Free year?
When you buy a new 5G phone.
New 5G phone?
Enough.
But I'm your hype man. When you purchase an eligible device, you get $25 off every month for 12 months with credits totaling 1 year of free service. Taxes extra for the device and service plan. Online only.
I'm no tech genius, but I knew if I wanted my business to crush it, I needed a website now. Thankfully, Bluehost made it easy. I customized, optimized, and monetized everything exactly how I wanted with AI. In minutes, my site was up. I couldn't believe it. The search engine tools even helped me get more site visitors. Whatever your passion project is, you can set it up with Bluehost. With their 30-day money-back guarantee, what have you got to lose? Head to bluehost.com to start now.
Right. And it's not surprising that the poetry of this period would be dark in light of what you just said. But actually, the darkness that we're going to see, specifically in this poem, predates even those war years. There's a lot of disillusionment, a lot of loneliness associated with technology and modern life and the way people weren't living in community as before. And this was making people struggle regardless. And you heard a lot of these things when we talked about Kafka and Metamorphosis a few series ago. Well, T.S. Eliot comes out of that. And the way he writes is difficult, like I said, because the emotions are complicated. The world is fragmented. It feels fragmented. And in the case of this poem that we're going to read this week and next week, really mostly next week, he wants to communicate certain feelings of isolation, underconfidence, loneliness, cowardness, pointlessness, tremendous amounts of anxiety. And the truth of the matter is, for Eliot, it doesn't matter if you understand what he's saying, if you understand the story. He wants you to understand the feelings. And I think even if you're confused, you get that.
And I see he focuses on all the fun feelings of human experience.
Yeah, it's not romantic in that sense.
This is no Jane Austen.
No, although there is an element of romanticism in there because he does talk a lot about the imagination. One reason I think this poem, or really a lot of modern poetry, is especially relevant today, specifically during our era, is because all the things that modern poets found wrong in the world, we've decided to rev up.
To increase them.
Yeah, instead of like saying, ooh, this made me sad, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, instead of let's do less of that,
we do more. I mean, think about COVID. And we can get personal here just for a minute, but we've watched over the last 15 months or so, entire generations of students suffer extreme isolation opposed by all the COVID protocols they're living with. And never mind the insidious aggressiveness and social pressure living through social media world. Lots of kids and even adults, we're just living more in our heads. Can't get out of our own psychology. And this is poor Alfred Prufrock to a T. And it might even have been Eliot. When Eliot writes the poem, he's 26 years old. That's pretty young for a poet. But he takes on the persona of a middle-aged man. So Prufrock is not 26. Later on in life, when Eliot was talking about the poem, he says the poem is partly a dramatic creation, but also partly an expression of his own feelings. So in a sense, young Eliot, maybe he's worried he's going to grow up and become middle-aged Prufrock if he isn't already. Prufrock is too much in his own head, and unfortunately, he thinks of himself as a loser. He's too self-conscious in general. He's too self-conscious about his physical appearance. He's bored with his circle of friends, or they're not even friends, with the people that he knows, his acquaintances. But because he's so underconfident, he's paralyzed. He's stuck. Prufrock has no energy. He has no courage. He has no confidence. He has no imagination. And all of this freezes him to not do a single thing that would actually alleviate his own misery. He just rolls over. He does the I'm going to roll over and die move. And what we're going to see is the poem starts with an allusion to hell.
Always a great start. I mean, that does sound like we can relate to every bit of that. I mean, so much of the COVID epidemic especially has left people too much in their own virtual infernos, if I can use that idea, to use Dante's illusion that Eliot does select. And Eliot didn't even know about the paranoia we created with Instagram filters and Snapchat videos and the ability to smear anyone at any time to millions of people for any reason, real or imagined, for anything you might have ever done or said to anyone. I mean, even a close family member, for as long as you've ever been on Earth. I mean, what would Eliot have said about that?
Yeah, when you put it that way, how do we survive?
Well, it is kind of dark.
It makes me wonder what the sequel would be if Eliot were around to write J. Alfred Prufrock III. Well, we know the end of Eliot's love story, his real love story, even his life in general, that Eliot was not Prufrock. He got over his fears of 26, and he was definitely not paralyzed into permanent paralysis.
Well, maybe he was just writing his own cautionary tale.
Reminding himself of,
Yes.
if I don't do, this is what I will
Right.
be.
This is a note to my future self.
Yeah.
Don't be this guy. Well, the emotions he expresses are not abnormal. In fact, they're really natural. I mean, everybody feels paralyzed with indecision at times, and we fear those emotions.
Of course, that's what Eliot does. He speaks for modern man, and we'll talk about next week when we talk about his Nobel Prize acceptance and what they said about him. But before we jump into all the literature, I do think it's interesting to get into a little bit of the biography, or I'll say the gossip.
Gossip, biography,
Today it's
same
going to
thing.
be a little bit more gossipy than usual because I've always seen these pictures of T.S. Eliot, and he's so austere looking. I would never have imagined the spicy love life he had in his own way. It's no rock star, but, you know, for a publisher poet.
Yeah. Well, this should be good for starters. Interestingly enough, Eliot and I have something in common. We're both from the great state of Missouri. We're Midwesterners by birth. As I've said many times before, I'm originally from Kansas City, but T.S. Eliot is from the second best city in Missouri, St. Louis.
Oh, do most people agree that St. Louis is the second best city in Missouri?
Well, most in Kansas City would, although some would rank it lower than the number 2 spot, not higher.
Oh, I see. Well, sorry, St. Louis. He's incorrigible. No disrespect. I'm pretty sure this all goes back to sports.
That's true. Go Chiefs. Go Royals. But getting back to Eliot, his grandfather actually moved to St. Louis from Boston and Harvard Divinity School to establish the first Unitarian church in St. Louis and to found Washington University, which today, if you're from this area, we affectionately call Wash U, and it's an extremely prestigious university. And so to use Fitzgerald's terms, the Eliots are one of those East Egg type families, except they're from Boston, not New York. And his dad was president of a huge brick company and lots of money and lots of community prestige and always very proud of their New England roots. And again, way more prestigious than the flyover country roots. So Thomas Stearns Eliot was born on September 26th, 1888.
September 26th. That's 2 days after F. Scott Fitzgerald's birthday and Anna's.
Oh, true. But Thomas Stearns, that sounds like a bank name.
It really
doesn't
does.
it? He is 8 years older than Fitzgerald and 110 years older than Anna, if we want to do the math. And he's the 7th child in his family, and he attended all private schools and unsurprisingly went to Harvard.
Well, nothing to complain about there.
Well, you might think that, except apparently it was not entirely blissful. I mean, ironically, when I read J. Alfred Prufrock and see all the angst and the self-inflicted misery, it's interesting to think he wrote it in college, especially since the weirdo character J. Alfred Prufrock is clearly middle-aged. I mean, I just assume the author was as well.
Well, he does claim that he wrote it in college, but I'm not sure that he finished it during his Harvard years. In fact, he obviously didn't. It wasn't published until 1915. So somewhere there's a lot that goes on in his personal life and his professional life, but mostly his personal life between college and when this poem gets published. And it had lots of edits along the way.
Well, and one of them being the start of a world war.
Oh, there is that. But during the years from the time he wrote the poem and when it got published, Eliot finished his undergraduate degree. He did that in 3 years. He started graduate school. Then he took a year off to go to the Sorbonne in Paris. He came back to Harvard, finished working on his PhD, but then changed courses right before he was going to graduate and decided to go back to Europe to study in Germany. Unfortunately, that was in 1914.
Ooh, bad year to be in Germany and to try to be a professional student. That's not exactly the best time or place to be in Europe if you're in the mood for touring. Since July 1914 is when World War I, or the Great War, as it was called up to that point, began.
No, it's not the summer to do your summer abroad in Germany. Then that literally was his plan. Oops.
True. So he went for plan B. He went to Oxford.
Yeah, that's landing on your feet.
That's good. And he attended school, and that went well, but he did make a misstep.
Yes, he did make a misstep.
He got married to a girl he didn't love, an English girl, Miss Vivian Haywood, in 1915, and apparently that could have not been more disastrous. And here's how he described it. These are his words. To her, the marriage brought no happiness. To me, it brought the state of mind out of which came the wasteland. Wow.
Well, if you know the poem, you know that it describes the entire devastation caused by World War.
I think that's an insult.
Not a good marriage endorsement for sure. It was miserable for both of them, and I don't want to get too off topic. Well, maybe I do, because, it's just interesting. We don't usually talk about this kind of thing, but I think in this case it's worth the exception.
Of course you do. It's too juicy not to.
Well, it's very unusual, and I'm interested in people's love lives in general. But in this case, if your breakout poem is titled A Love Song.
Well, especially when said love song is about a guy who has no love, which clearly he did not at the time he wrote this poem.
Well, maybe he didn't, but maybe he did. His perspective on love might be a little skewed by the bad marriage and the analogy to World War I.
I think those two things would do it.
And people at this time were a little bit jaded anyway. I get that.
Well, when you think World War I might have left people disillusioned, it was 8.5 million combatant deaths, as well as another 13 million civilian deaths on top of that. I mean, it's a complete expression of revenge and violence, just fully developed, really, in the most technological, mechanized, and human and destructive form. So, yeah, not good.
No, I agree. And I will say that Eliot speaks to those issues with power and emotion, and that's what The Wasteland is all about. It's really not a small reason why he won the Nobel Prize, but Prufrock isn't about war. Prufrock is earlier. It's a dramatic monologue, and what that means, it's one person making a speech, but it's not really a speech. He calls it a love song, but it's not really a love song, and it certainly wouldn't land you a kiss at the end of any date to hear these words. It's strange. But so is Eliot's love drama. So that's what I want to talk about first.
All right, well, let's do it.
Well, you mentioned that Eliot went to France for a year. Then he came back to the United States to go to Harvard, which he did while he was working on his PhD. He reacquainted himself with a family friend, a girl named Emily Hale. Her dad taught at Harvard, too, and he was a Unitarian minister, so they were in the same kind of religious tradition. Anyway, this is where the strangeness comes in. Eliot fell in love with Emily. Let me quote Eliot here. He says this: I wish the statement by myself to be made public as soon as the letters to Miss Hale are made public. I fell in love with Emily Hale in 1912 when I was in the Harvard Graduate School. Before I left for Germany and England in 1914, I told her that I was in love with her. Now, that's interesting because this did not come out until way after he died. But what he's saying is, I was in love with Emily Hale right before marrying Vivian. It's around this time that he's writing Prufrock.
Can we assume that she didn't love him back? I mean, when was this public love statement made or released?
So strange. First of all, to answer your first question, we have to assume something happened, but who knows what? We know he confessed his love to her, but we also know he didn't propose. Maybe he was just like Prufrock and never had the nerve to make a move. Maybe he was going to propose, but she gave him some sort of vibe that she would reject him, and so he didn't do it. I'm not sure. What we do know is what he did. He moved to Europe and impulsively married a girl he knew he didn't love. I know. That doesn't pass the say out loud test at all. But even after they got married, both of them knew it wasn't the right thing. She almost immediately had an affair with Bertrand Russell. But beyond that, in his words, Vivian was, as they say back then, nervous. Which for us, that sounds harmless, but being nervous in those days is not harmless. Today, we would say she suffers from mental illness. She was bipolar as well as paranoid schizophrenic. And her condition was severe, and it worsened until finally she dies in her 50s. They do separate, though, although she thinks he was kidnapped, but they never divorce. All that's sad, and that's, kind of understandable and not a story we haven't heard before. But here's the gossipy part that really gets me and kind of plays into the Prufrock love story. So here it goes. In 1930, 15 years after marrying Vivian, Eliot begins to correspond with Emily again. She'd been in London, they'd had tea, and things rekindled.
Oh, this sounds like a British romance in the making, which is always...
Love over tea?
Well, understated, nobody saying what they mean.
Maybe so, because over the course of the next 30 years... he would write her 1,131 letters, and these letters were very personal, and Emily kept all of them. He claimed to be in love. Here's some quotes from these letters. Quote, "You have made me perfectly happy, that is, happier than I have ever been in my life, and the only kind of happiness now possible for the rest of my life is now with me. And though it is the kind of happiness which is identical with my deepest loss and sorrow, it is a kind of supernatural ecstasy." He said this, here's another one. "I tried to pretend that my love for you was dead, though I could only do so by pretending myself that my heart was dead. At any rate, I resigned myself to celibate old age."
I don't get the conclusion there, but go
Well,
ahead.
he goes on like that for years. Let me say this. 30. That's not a small amount of time. And in his mind, over the course of these 30 years, after writing all these letters, he built her up into this daisy-like ideal of perfection. She was in love with him too, because who wouldn't be after so many confessions? He confessed to her not just that he loved her, but he told her intimate things that he wasn't telling anyone, but that was surfacing in his work, and she was giving him feedback. She was, in some sense, people have said, an idol. He became emotionally dependent on her. So this went on and on and on until his wife died. When his wife died at the early age, 58, they could finally be together. And Emily had every expectation that this would be the case. So Vivian dies in 1947. Eliot would write Hale only 180 letters for the next 10 years. They kind of cut her off. And then to everyone's shock, 10 years later in 1957, he marries his secretary, Valerie Fletcher, who's 38 years younger than him. This is a blow that Emily never recovers from. She never saw or met Valerie, and his last letter to her was written a month after he married her. Emily was devastated.
Of course. So no one in England saw it coming either?
No, nobody. It was secret, not even in their office where they worked. So that's kind of crazy, but it's not even the end of the craziness. Emily's letters to Eliot don't exist because Eliot destroyed them all, but Emily kept hers. That was actually a disagreement on their part. He wasn't all that excited about that to begin with. But he finally said, and let me quote him, "As for my letters, they are your property, and their fate must be decided by you." And so she donated them to the Princeton Library with the understanding, because he didn't really want all that personal stuff out there, that they would only be opened 50 years after her death. Well, she died in 1969.
Well, and this is the irony to me. I mean, the long-awaited opening of the letters happened on January 2nd, 2020, which was just last year. So this drama is still not over. I mean, what did we find out? Did he confess to be Prufrock?
Well, that's the thing. People say that they don't disappoint, that the letters are awesome, and they reveal all kinds of stuff. But the problem is, 2 months after the world gets to see these letters, COVID happens. And the library closes and nobody is able to get to them. Almost no one has read these letters. Nobody really knows what they say, and no one has studied them. The secrets are not yet fully revealed.
Oh, so we don't have a Netflix miniseries on it yet.
No.
Right? So, well, it just sounds like the drama never dies. Well, before we get to Prufrock, the poem, let's tell the end of the romantic drama. Does the marriage with Valerie work out?
Well, we have to leave Emily alone because, we can't get into her. But as far as Eliot is concerned, yeah, it really does. I think they were compatible. They had a good marriage. He wrote her a love poem every single week. They were happy. She managed his estate and actually did a really great job with it. She managed their finances during his life and his estate and everything Eliot related after his death.
Well, what about Emily?
Well, she was gracious. Let's put it that way. She said this, and I'm going to give her this quote. "The memory of the years when we were most together and so happy are mine always, and I am grateful that this period brought some of his best writing and an assured, charming personality, which perhaps I helped to stabilize."
Does he ever explain why he never married her?
He does, but not to my satisfaction. I don't like his satisfaction. It's kind of strange. He says that he wanted to remain single and how some men just really want a surrogate Virgin Mary in their life. And that's what she was for him.
I don't think that's a line most women want to hear.
I would say no. I'm your surrogate Virgin Mary. Oh, my. Anyway, okay, so that's that story. So we can move on to the poem. Obviously, I've taken up too much time to explicate it sentence by sentence. That would be the right thing to do if you really wanted to get the whole sense of it. But I don't know that most people do, and we certainly couldn't do it in a podcast, not even two. But what I would like to do is set up the poem in a way that you can understand it, you can admire it, and hopefully be able to enjoy it, even if you don't get the line-by-line analysis. So we're going to give it a read. I'll let you read it, and then I'll interrupt you from time to time, especially if I see your eyes kind of glaze over in utter confusion.
Well, you've made the reading process really sound glamorous there.
I know. Because I want people to be forewarned that it gets confusing, and it gets confusing fast. We don't even have to start the poem. There's a preface, and the preface isn't even in English. The poem begins with a quote from Dante's The Divine Comedy, and the quote's in Italian. The speaker in the quote is this poor guy named Guido de Montefeltro, and poor Guido is stuck in the deepest, bottomless part of hell, partly for dispensing terrible advice. Guido speaks with a flame that quivers when he talks, and he says that he would never tell anyone anything about himself if he thought it would ever get out because it's too embarrassing. But since people who go to that part of hell never get out, he feels he can be honest to Dante.
So the parallels that Prufrock is also speaking from his own personal hell. And,
Yes.
And doesn't think anybody will know his story because they can't see his hell, except
Yes.
that Dante does. I mean, I can see the irony already.
Yes, Prufrock is exposed. Guido is exposed. That's it indeed. So this is a poem about a man. He's created a personal hell that he can't get out of. It's about his isolation. It's about his embarrassment. It's about his lack of personal agency. Notice all that, and we're not even into the poem. We've already gotten two allusions. One's a classical allusion. One is a biblical allusion. Obviously, the classical allusion is the Dante quote. But in the Dante quote, we see a flame of fire. And that connects us to the Holy Spirit of God, who gives voice to the apostles in the New Testament to proclaim God's words. So Eliot really minds this idea of using literature to explain literature. There's so many allusions. He's going to allude to more than one Shakespeare play. He alludes to passages in the Bible. He alludes to poets that people are familiar with, like Andrew Marvell and Robert Browning. And the more you know about the people that he references, the more sense his work makes and the more, layers you can add to it. Even if you don't really get the gist of what the words mean, you may understand the sentiment of the allusion.
Well, I was going to bring up at some point the famous declaration that Eliot made about himself. And this was later in life after he'd naturalized as a British citizen. So he said of himself, "I am a classicist in literature, a royalist in politics, an Anglo-Catholic in religion."
That's true, and that is a famous quote. And you can see right there, first of all, that he loves the classics, but he respects longevity. I mean, classics are deep-rooted. The monarchy is deep-rooted, and of course, so is the Catholic Church. These are things that endure over time. And I will say that at the time that Eliot wrote Prufrock, he really wasn't even a Christian. He had been raised a Unitarian, but he didn't really have an active faith. All of that you just read about was something that he developed over the course of his life. At the time of this writing specifically, and even, a lot during his early years, he was interested in Eastern religions. He was interested in Buddhism, and he was interested in Hinduism. And he didn't really land on the Catholic faith until much later. And this will come out not really so much in this work, but if you're ever going to read any of his later works, and a lot of his literary criticism, it actually I kind of like better than his poetry because, I can read it without getting a headache. Eliot really sees literature, and this is something that I take from Eliot and I agree with him on. Literature is a conversation over time, a back and forth with people that have been thinking about ideas for centuries, sometimes longer than that. He wants to talk to ancient writers. He wants them to talk to us and put their ideas in his work and kind of incorporate this dialogue into modern thought. This is what they think. This is what I think. This is what I borrowed. This is what I challenged. That's what's going on with all these allusions. So, having said that, let's look at the title.
Shall we start with the historical allusion that takes us back to Missouri?
Well, we might as well, even though I wasn't really going to reference this one because I didn't even know about it.
Well, most people wouldn't. The Prufrocks are not historical icons. In fact, today they're completely unknown unless you're walking around the Bell Fountain Cemetery in St. Louis where Eliot grew up. During Eliot's growing up years, there was a local furniture store called William Prufrock Furniture Store. Harry Prufrock, the son who ran a store during Eliot's life, was a master marketer and brander back before the internet blew up that field. And he would publish these giant full-page ads in the local paper of the Prufrock family eating. They'd be eating a meal at a kitchen table that came from the Prufrock furniture store, or they were working on a Prufrock desk, and they were local celebrities in that they personified the middle-class life in St. Louis, and they were always in the paper. And
so Eliot lifted their name and memorialized them as cliched middle-classers.
Ouch.
And J. Alfred Prufrock is definitely middle class. The way he writes the name is designed to sound like he's trying to be sophisticated. His first name is an initial. He goes by two names. He doesn't have a nickname like Huck or Butch or Nick or anything like that.
Alf.
The last thing we're going to talk about, though, is that maybe it's a nerdy sounding name if you want to think of it that way. The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, a modern, middle class, maybe even upper class, average guy. So once we establish the name, now let's go about the love song thing. And that's kind of the last thing we're going to have time to talk about today, because this is a love song. He calls it a love song. Not the kind Tim McGraw sings with Faith Hill, talking about true love and played at weddings. When he calls this a love song, he's specifically trying to conjure up images of roses and chocolates and romantic beaches and serenades and vows of life together and blissful harmony. And then he's not going to give you any of that. This is not what's in the love life for poor J. Alfred. The love song for a middle-aged, balding guy with a name like J. Alfred Prufrock consists of the things in this poem. One-night cheap hotels, restaurants with sawdust on the floor. These are seedy images. They're lonely. Maybe they're sexual, maybe they're not, but they're definitely not intimate, and they're definitely not happy. Is that what we can expect from a love song in these conditions?
Ironically.
Well, on that note, we will leave you thinking about that as we await the explanation next week.
Oh, well, I just can't wait for that. That'll be great fun.
I think so.
Thank you all for being with us today. We always like to encourage you to follow us on all of our social media and to check out our website at howtolovelitpodcast.com and recommend us to a friend. You can even text an episode to them. Thanks for being with us.
Peace out.
Every day there's a new challenge to face. So meet Trimble, the technology company that connects your physical and digital worlds, allowing you to make decisions and take intelligent action to get the hard work done. And the best part, you can do it all faster than you've ever thought possible. Check them out at Trimble.com. You ready to turn data points into decision points or turn deadlines into finish lines? How about turning possibilities into profits? Then turn to Trimble.
Only Boost Mobile.
Boost Mobile.
We'll give you a free year of service.
Free year?
When you buy a new 5G phone.
New 5G phone?
Enough.
But I'm your hype man. When you purchase an eligible device, you get $25 off every month for 12 months with credits totaling 1 year of free service. Taxes extra for the device and service plan. Online only.
Hey, I'm Paige DeSorbo, and I'm always thinking about underwear.
I'm Hannah Berner, and I'm also thinking about underwear, but I prefer full coverage. I like to call them my granny panties.
Actually, I never think about underwear. That's the magic of Tommy John.
Same. They're so light and so comfy, and if it's not comfortable, I'm not wearing it.
And the bras, soft, supportive, and actually breathable.
Yes, Lord knows the girls need to breathe. Also, I need my PJs to breathe and be buttery soft and stretchy enough for my dramatic tossing and turning at night. That's why I live in my Tommy John pajamas.
Plus, they're so cute because they fit perfectly.
Put yourself on to Tommy John.
Upgrade your drawer with Tommy John. Save 25% for a limited time at TommyJohn.com/comfort. See site for details.